But I think one has to step back and understand that the nation state structures in the global south is a byproduct of the colonial period. And again, this is across the global south. If you looked at the world in 1914, 85% of the global world surface was a colonial possession. Either you were a colony of the British, the French, the Dutch, the Portuguese, the Italians, and the Germans coming late, and also the United States having saying that it does not have colonial possessions, but it has territories, and acting with the Monroe Doctrine across the Western Hemisphere. The nation states that we have emerging in the 20th century through the anti-colonial struggles were born into a colonial epistemological structures. And we fail to recognize that we have not went to decolonization, we only went into anti-colonial struggle. And the anti-colonial struggle, successful, it extracted the colonial troops. But the structure in the societies is colonial to the core. Our epistemology is colonial. Our politics is colonial. Our philosophy is colonial. Our understanding of the self is colonial. Our economy is colonial, as well as, and this one also one of my arguments, our understanding and relationship to Islam itself is born out of the colonial experience and colonial legacy. So as such, if we don't take account of this and understand that our attempt to enter into the modern period has been shaped, negotiated, framed around the colonial legacy. This is not, in essence, to say that we don't have agency. We do. But one has to account where that agency that we have in engaging in extracting ourselves of the colonial project is what are the things that we need to navigate. And in essence, the Muslim world for, I would say, the past 150 to 200 years have experienced the colonial, post-colonial legacy without actually thinking through in a systematic way of what does it mean to actually decolonize the mind as well as decolonize the society. So in this sense, Muslim majority societies are still trying to act and to prove their worthiness in a world system that looks at them in the negative and in the erasure of the specificity of who they are, and more importantly, their epistemological construct of who they are in a pre-colonial is not permitted to actually have any representation or to have actually ability to construct the self and shape a future horizon based on it. So to be modern in the Muslim world today, you have to structurally take an antagonistic relationship to Islam. And I'm saying Islam, not Islamism, because again, I find these terminologies problematic because it also emerges out of a particular colonial, post-colonial, modern construct of Western definition of what it is. At the core, when the French, the British, the Portuguese, when they were writing and dealing, they were dealing with Islam. Now we have these attempts to try to create a spectrum of Islam. In essence, is a form of divide and conquer. So we also need to make sure that this framing that is being constructed of the good Muslim, bad Muslim, so you have too much Islam or little Islam, and if we just get you a, one of these pills that is produced by a pharmaceutical company, you'll get rid of too much Islam in you, right? But you never actually can give somebody a pill that will remove too much colonial discourse in them, because the pillar of civilization, as is defined today, is based on a Eurocentric construction. So the fact that you're living in the Muslim world, your identification of your own self, your society, the notion of what to emphasis to build is based on what the Eurocentricity actually put for you and what the colonial legacy put for you. So that's why these tensions that we see, still we have not extracted ourselves from the colonial legacy that continue to shape every part of our society. I know in certain Muslim countries, the notions of to be educated is to be educated on the British type of educational enterprise. So this is educated and this is backward, right? And in order for you to be defined as an educated person, you have to imbibe the British mannerism, imbibe the particular understanding of the self as an intellectual, as a scholar. You have to quote, as my friend Ramon Grasfugel, which we had a discussion yesterday, you have to quote scholars of the 5 countries. You have to quote the French, the British, the German, the Italian, and the American. And if you don't quote them, then you are not educated, quote unquote. If you don't quote anyone in the Muslim world, you're actually not seen as to be uneducated. You could actually get a PhD in many parts of the Muslim world itself without actually having to have known any of the major thinkers, contributors into your own civilization. But you actually can roll 20 names of authors in the various colonial, post-colonial scholars from the global north, and that makes you enter into being, quote, educated. In essence, we have a process, both discovering the self is by means of actually seeking intellectual as well as spatial proximity to your ex-colonial master motherland. So these are, I think, the discussions that need to be had. And I haven't yet touched on the economies of the Muslim world. Our economies are still a pipeline to provide either raw material or to provide cheap labor force as a processing plant for the consumers and the products of the colonial global north, meaning Europe and the United States. And our economic infrastructure has nothing to do with our Islamic understanding. And even I'm very critical also of what you call taking capitalism, neoliberal economics, and just putting Bismillah on top of it. So you Islamicize that which has nothing to do with Islam itself, Bismillah on top and Alhamdulillah at the bottom, and in between it's Adam Smith, neoliberal economics, IMF, World Bank, and all of the nonsense that structurally create poverty at every turn. So again, this is another dimension. If we don't address the economic issues that are there, that the Muslim world is still in its economy, its post-colonial economy, is an economy that raw material, cheap labor, as well as open markets to dump the products of the global north. Luxury items are not. And again, you ask the question in any of the Muslim countries. So if you go to Egypt or if you go to any Muslim countries, ask them in terms of what products they value. They will tell you French products, British products, and so on. What are the cities that they want to visit, aside from Mecca and Medina? Put that aside. You will find all of them are in their imagination, are representative of what are the site of civilization or the site of have reaching the pinnacle. All this is constructed around this epistemology that we need to be aware of.